I was kind of wanting to kind of talk about your experience maybe as a not religious person, not spiritual person, who was maybe without realizing it, an unwitting,
unwitting yogi, I like to say, right. Well, that's definitely the case. I say that all us human beings are like seeds planted in the soil of the darkness of the collective consciousness. And we send out shoots from that seed. The darkness and the moisture of the separateness actually nurtures the consciousness to separate itself, to form its own sense of self. And it sends out this shoot of individual consciousness merging out from the muck and the unconsciousness of life. We do it every birth. Every birth we're thrown into a state of unconsciousness, even not while awake. We don't know anything, and we have to learn everything all over again. So we emerge up, out, and then wake up to the world, penetrate into a dimension where there's other people, not just mom and dad and you, or any of the other family situations, and you begin to expand. This evolutionary movement in consciousness is reenacted every birth. So we're all going through this process of emerging out from a diminished condition of being into a more and more expanded and true condition of being, be it in our mental development, our emotional development, our what we make important, what we value, what we look forward to, in our bodily development. And the bodily developments are reflective, the maturing process of a child into late childhood, to adolescence, to early adulthood. These all reflect a shifting in consciousness that's occurring. The only thing is we stop. In the human development, we stop in that evolutionary movement. We build so much baggage about what's possible and what's real and what can happen, what can't happen, that we close down the further steps of the unfolding journey until we come to this category where we have an experience that's outside of the context of ourselves and life that we're used to.
Well, and in your case, you were a heavily committed career person, an architect with his own extremely demanding practice, and I think there was also a major career opportunity that was concurrent with the
expansion of me at that stage. Yeah, it just so happened that I reached a stage that expansion was going to happen one way or another, and for whatever reason, perhaps because of the early orientation to Meher Baba and spirituality when I was in my teenage years.
And you've also talked about how, in terms of your own cosmology, that in a previous lifetime you had awakened to the self.
When you take a birth after having been awakened to yourself, you're an ego, but you're a freed ego, relatively speaking. That means you don't know what you are yet, but you don't take identification, attachment, and desire as much as other human beings do. I meet people like this all the time. So I meet people, year one, who's taken a birth have already attained the self. So now you may not know that you had attained the self, and you may not have done anything with it between the death and the birth of this life. But the bottom line of it is there was already a capacity to come out of the box that most human beings get overtaken by at a certain stage of their natural development. So, like old dogs don't learn new tricks very well. So it's the same thing. The more we live, the more the ego gets consolidated, the more it gets organized, the more it finds its little piece of happiness within its adjustments and decisions and choices. So the less likely they're going to break out of the box of ego.
I understand what you're saying, but I can't help but wonder if there isn't a lot more of what we call spiritual awakening just below the surface, as it were, for a lot of people. Well, for instance, as I watched all the installments of your Bhagavad Gita series on YouTube, even though it's supposed to relate to basically 18 ascending stages of enlightenment, I found myself relating to all of it.
Yes, and to a certain extent, you're relating it through the lens of your experience up to now, And that lens is fairly well developed, so you're able to project what you know to what is not yet completely known. So this is the nature of thinking, okay, well, I've already got that. That's what ego will do. It's trying to consolidate its position on the spiritual path. It's trying to find a frame of reference rather than this constant having to be unfolded and unfolded and unfolded.
Well, in my case, yeah, there was certainly that, like the ego wanting to like own where it is
as being sufficient.
To the awakening.
Yeah.
But there was also like I've tasted that.
Well, and that's also true. That was the other side of what I was going to say. The backside is all of these things can occur anywhere along the journey of the awakening, of the spiritual journey, of the return journey. So you can, at the very beginning, have glimpses of the reality of your nature that's going to occur towards the end of your journey, or a third of the way of the journey, or 2/3 of the way of the journey. You can meet what you imagine in your first awakening, what you think are a very ascended being or divine being, which is actually yourself appearing at a higher state than one you're able to access right now. So there's not, in one sense, we're going anywhere. The only thing that's happening is we're training the ego to be in relationship to a reality that's already here. So everything that's ascribed in the 18 chapters of the Gita is already here. But our ability to experience it in a continuous way is dependent upon our ability to dismantle this egoic identity, to allow us to move into relationship to this always present, always now, always real condition of consciousness.
Right, and to be kind of like stabilized
Stabilizing
at a given
is,
level.
and the advantage of stabilization is that you begin to integrate whatever that level you've come to. So there is some time, utility in spending some time at different stages on the journey instead of just directly ascending all the way to the absolute. So it just depends on the system. For example, some people, there is so much repulsion to the world that the only relief is the absolute. So they'll bypass all the lovely, entertaining kingdoms that occur in between to get to the absolute. And then after they get to the absolute, they stay in their body, they'll fall back and start meeting at different times these other kingdoms because they're always present. They're always here. Mm-hmm. And they start meeting it and enjoy it, but they're already, everything that was them is gone. So there's not really enjoyment. There's just being with. So they're much more witnessing. But if somebody comes up through an experiential path and every little step is just this glorified, wondrous kingdom, and all you want to do is play in that kingdom, then for them, it's to know that there's something more. Because otherwise you'll get lost in the horizontal, not continuing in the vertical development. Mm-hmm. And so for them it's much slower because they don't have a grasp of the absolute truth. That was my experience. My experience was that every different dimension was so wonderfully better than the one that I was in before, that I thought that was it.
So then would you say it's likely that I have a grasp of this absolute truth?
Yes, and there are, like I say, there are awareness people and experiential people. Awareness people have a grasp of the absolute truth. Experiential people have a grasp of divine love. They have love as their goal. Awareness people have truth as their goal. Now, people who are pushed by love, they will seek greater and greater relationship to the divine person, divine being, whatever form it may happen. And if they succeed, they start merging with that identity, that form that projected God, Vishnu, Shiva, Brahman, whatever it be. They start merging with it. And they start taking on the characteristics of it. But they aren't able to actually fully merge. They get up, they touch the cloak, the feet of God, and then they fall back. And then they long and anguish, and they touch it, and then fall back. It's only if they have enough awareness that comes that they are able to see there's something more. Then they allow themselves to merge with God. And when they merge with God, then they immediately meet truth. Mm-hmm. So that was my experience. The only reason I knew to keep going was because of my teacher, who was an awareness being, and he went right to truth. Mm-hmm. And I could recognize in him the the truth, so that when I was traveling my experiential journey, I knew this wasn't it.
Oh.
This wasn't it. This wasn't it. And having a model was very, very useful for me. And because I had developed as a Westerner with an intellectual mind and trained my mental to be an architect, there was this scientific curiosity about the whole process. Even though I'm in oceans of devotion and surrender and all the rest of it, there was this kind of analytical part.
So for someone like me who's more of an awareness being, is it an advantage to have a teacher like you whose path led more through experience?
Well, the advantage of, for an awareness being, you don't need a teacher as much to recognize the value of absolute truth until you come to the place of going beyond your ego. Because awareness beings tend to have a stronger egoic identification. They've used their mind more, used their sense of I more, and the path of awareness is more separative. It's more repulsion and fear, while the path of experience is more attraction and desire. Mm-hmm. So there is a pattern of rejecting what it doesn't want to experience. So awareness being will go only so far and live in its lofty tower, aloof from any unwanted experiences. Doesn't want to know that it's an egomaniac. It doesn't want to know that it's looking to be special. It doesn't want to know those things. So an experiential being will bring out those things that are going to prevent you from being able to truly reach truth. Mm-hmm. So,
yeah, like with you, a big part of your work with me, and I've seen it now with many other devotees, is to have us really work with our unresolved issues in the body, to experience them physically rather than just try to process them mentally. So why is that? What's the deficiency of the purely mental?
Well, it will get you to a lofty tower. It'll get you to a place of awareness that is steady and true. You can actually, in the Gita, you can get to the 8th chapter of the Gita of the Brahman, nirvana, but it comes and goes. It keeps coming and going because the individual vehicle has not been purified enough to hold the state of consciousness of the Brahman or of the Absolute. So the vehicle has to be prepared. If it's not, then you'll cut to a place and you'll think this is it, because there's no other authority than you. And you're not likely to turn to someone else to guide you further, because the ego's laid claim through its separation, through its judgment, through its rejection, through its doubt, to its righteousness, to it what it has attained. So the danger of the awareness path is arrogance, and that's where it gets stuck, and it becomes its own authority. And since very few people are higher than them, and even if they are higher than them, they might not want to bother with another arrogant egoic awareness being. So there is what will bring a teacher to you is a surrendering, a quality of surrender, a quality of willingness to open up, to let go. So even an awareness being won't be drawn to me unless they're willing to get off their certainty about where they are, or what they know, or their teachers, or their lineages, or their practices. There has to be something in them that can surrender.